that we practice emergency drills during our daily lives so that we can be prepared for any such circumstances. As soon as you feel the earthquake, hide your body under a table to protect yourself. When the shaking has stopped, shut off the gas valves and turn off the electricity, and locate your way of exit by opening the doors. If you're coming out of a multi-story building, use the stairs and definitely not the elevators. When outside the building, rush to an open field and cover your head while en route. Finally, tune into a broadcasting channel and keep yourself updated on what's happening and what to do next. But remember, prevention is the best solution. This campaign is brought to you by BFM 부산영어방송.
지금 방송 광고라는 부메랑을 던져보세요. 소비자를 향해 정확히 날아가는 광고. 힘차게 돌아가는 경제. 부메랑처럼 다시 기업의 이익으로 되돌아오니까요. 방송 광고, 경제에 큰 힘이 됩니다. 부산 방송광고발전협의회.
The time is now 7 o'clock.
Yesterday, as you all know, was the first day of early voting here in South Korea for the presidential election. Did you have a chance to vote? Well, there was a big turnout at the 3,568 polling stations nationwide. As Abraham Lincoln famously said about voting, so here's a quote from him, "Elections belong to the people. It's their decision. If they decide to turn their back on the fire and burn their behinds, then they will have to sit on their blisters." Think about that. I'm Catherine. This is Morning Wave in Busan on Friday, May 30th on BEFM 부산영어방송. Good morning, Wavers. It is a very important day. Not only is it Friday, which we all love, well, it's the second day of early voting. It has begun, kicking off at 6 a.m. this morning for the presidential election. So yes, today will be the second and final day of early voting. Voter turnout for day one came to 19.58% across the country, the highest ever for early voting, they say. The National Election Commission, or NEC, said that of the 44.39 million eligible voters, 8.69 million have cast their ballots. And early voting voter turnout is well on its way to surpass the previous record of 36.93% from the 20th presidential election. At the same time, unfounded conspiracy theories about the validity or credibility of early voting continues, prompting the NEC to issue an apology. So some of you might have heard about this. The NEC said that there were lapses in management at a polling station in Sinchon, Seoul. According to the Secretary General of the NEC, a line had formed out of the door of people who had received their ballots. So some of the voters actually exited the line, which means that the ballots had technically left the polling station. However, he reassured the public that the number of ballots issued and the number of envelopes containing said ballots in the ballot box matched exactly. Nonetheless, he admitted that what had happened was outside common sense and accepted responsibility and issued a sincere apology. The election authorities vowed a thorough management strategy to make sure that the voters be reassured today, the second day of early voting, and on Election Day, which is next Tuesday. So that is where we are. We're going to continue to talk about the presidential election throughout the program. In the meantime, it's time for a text topic. Are you ready? Here we go. People challenge themselves to a variety of things, both big and small. So what do you want to challenge yourself to do? No matter how big, or you might think, oh, this is so small. It's so minor. 자, 마라톤, 명산 등반, 머리카락 길러서 기부하기, whatever it is. 내가 도전하고 싶은 챌린지는? Oh, what might it be? Or maybe have you already achieved one? Let us know about that too. You can send in your thoughts, your opinions to BFM's live stream live chat on YouTube. Go to the YouTube platform, type in BEFM or 부산영어방송 to find our channel, subscribe, log in, and chat with our other waivers. Also, through your phone, pound 9050. Shop 9050, that's going to cost you 101. You can also reach me for free through Kakao Talk. To find us, same thing there. Type in BEFM, 부산영어방송, add us as a friend first, and you can send in your messages, photos as well. The ways you can listen to our show on the radio in Busan, 90.5 or 103.3 FM. And like I said, we're streaming live in real time right now. You can watch again at your leisure. We're available on the BEFM app or the Papang app. You can listen to the Waga Waga segment on the Papang app, and both are free. Looking ahead to our Friday morning together, we have Casey with Foreign Press Highlights. That's in hour number 1. And then we have Global Affairs with Professor Andrew Millard. In our special interview today, we're going to be focusing on the presidential election with Professor Kim Byung-ju. That is coming up in hour number 2. So stay tuned for that. Plus a lot more. I'll be back with news overview. It's now 7:05 and this is News Overview. Early voter turnout hits record high on first day. An all-time high of 19.58% of voters cast their ballots yesterday. Jeonnam had the highest voter turnout at 34.96%, with Daegu the lowest at 13.42%. Navy patrol aircraft crashes, killing 4 officers. A P-3 maritime patrol aircraft took off at 1:43 p.m. in Pohang and crashed some 6 minutes later, according to the Navy, due to an unspecified reason. It has retrieved the bodies of all 4 officers. BOK cuts key rate to 2.5% amid a dim growth forecast. The Bank of Korea lowered its benchmark interest rate by a quarter percentage point to 2.5% yesterday in an effort to prop up economic growth amid sluggish domestic demand and uncertainties coming from the U.S. Government presents additional flood prevention measures ahead of summer. The government yesterday put forth additional flood prevention measures ahead of the summer season, following up on a comprehensive package of preventive steps announced just 2 weeks ago. U.S. court temporarily reinstates Trump's tariffs. An appeals court has agreed that Trump's tariffs could remain in place while an appeal hearing by the Trump administration is going on, giving the administration a temporary victory. And this was News Overview. It's time for Now in Busan, and filling in once again for Sejin, we have Claire. Welcome back, Claire.
Hello, good morning.
Yes. So before we dive into Now in Busan, we're talking about mini or even major challenges. Are there any challenges that you want to partake in, or just, challenging yourself in something?
Challenging myself Right now, waking up very early. Bright and early.
It's a struggle, right?
It's a struggle. But I'm managing it.
Yes,
I
yes.
say it's a challenge.
Well, thank you for sharing your challenge in the morning. Yes, it's tough waking up this early. We're going to dive into our first bit of local news. So we're going to begin with the first day of early voting. How did that happen and how did it go down in Busan?
Yes, overall turnout was solid. As of 7 a.m. this morning, Busan's early voting rate is 17.81%, according to the National Election Commission. That's over 509,000 people out of the city's 2.86 million registered voters.
I see. And how does this compare to past elections?
It's a bit higher for comparison. At the same time, during the 2022 presidential election, Busan's early voting rate was 16.51%.
Okay.
So we're seeing a modest increase.
Interesting. So were there any differences across the different districts?
Yes, Yeongdo-gu district had the highest turnout at nearly 19.81%,
Okay.
while Gijang-gun County was the lowest at 15.7%. And it wasn't just the numbers. Across the city, there were steady lines all day, especially right before opening at 6 a.m. yesterday and around lunchtime.
Well, it does sound like people really made an effort to go out and vote on day one. But I hear that there were also a few incidents, correct?
That's true. Busan police reported about 40 calls to 112 related to early voting. The most serious cases involved disturbances at polling places. In one case, a man in his 60s, reportedly intoxicated, caused a scene by shouting that people should vote for a specific candidate. He was arrested for violating election laws.
And as we all know, that's quite serious, correct?
Yes, and there was some complaints about mismatches in voter counts. A few polling places had observers claiming that the numbers of voters they counted didn't match the official numbers, but both the police and election commission looked into it and said the tallies were correct.
Okay. So overall, a good turnout. There were a few hiccups, but it seems like the process is still holding up, correct?
Exactly. And for today, the second and final day for early voting, our polls are open until 6 p.m. Voters just need a valid voter ID, like a resident ID, passport, or driver's license. Mobile IDs are okay too, but screenshots of IDs aren't accepted.
That's right. So please be reminded once again, all the waivers out there. We're going to shift gears and talk about some industrial news that happened yesterday.
Yes, Busan has been selected for the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy's 2025 Specialized Industrial Zone project. It's part of an effort to modernize what's called Korea's root industries, 뿌리산업, the backbone of traditional manufacturing.
Yes, so what is Busan's role in this?
Busan will focus on two areas. First one is textile surface processing and eco-friendly smart coating systems. One project will invest over 4.4 billion Korean won across 3 years to turn a dyeing cluster into a smart automotive industry zone. Another will bring 1.7 billion won this year to modernize wastewater treatment systems and build smart monitoring facilities.
So it does sound like they're trying to upgrade old industries with new tech.
Indeed. The mayor said this will help move Busan's older manufacturing base towards sustainable, smart innovation.
Yes. Thanks for letting us know about this. And now I hear you have something for pet owners.
Yes, big news there too. The city has officially approved the construction of a university-level animal hospital, the largest of its kind in Korea.
That's really exciting. So where's it going to be?
It'll be built on the Dongmyeong University campus in Namgu District, but operated by Gyeongsang National University. The hospital will be a full-scale facility with emergency, surgical, and internal medicine units, plus training and research labs as well.
Well, what about the timeline?
Construction starts in October and is expected to finish by June 2027.
Oh, that's just in a couple years, exactly. So I'm sure many people are looking forward to having this kind of facility here. All right, Claire, since we just talked about a new animal hospital, it looks like there is another update that might make pet owners happy.
That's right. Sticking with the pet-friendly theme, Busan is launching a new pilot program to allow dogs and their owners to enjoy grassy areas at selected public parks.
Oh, really? So that is kind of a major shift because, from what I understand, thus far, the lawns have been usually kind of like off limits, right?
Yes. Up until now, stepping on the grass with your dog was typically a no-no. But with more than 30% of households now raising pets, the city is adapting to growing demand for shared outdoor spaces.
So how's this going to work?
So starting next month and running through October, some major parks across the city will open designated lawn areas. Pet owners can bring their dogs as long as they're on leashes. And they'll also be allowed to set up small items like shade tents, folding chairs, or picnic mats.
Okay, that's good to know. Any rules that they need to follow?
Of course, yes. Owners must clean up after their pets and follow all posted safety guidelines. Each gu and district will manage the specifics, but the city is providing basic operating standards to guide the rollout.
Some people might think, it's kind of a smaller change, but for others, this could make a big difference.
Absolutely. It's about making the city more livable for everyone, including our four-legged companions.
Indeed. Thanks for covering that. All right, Claire, we have covered everything from elections to industry and even pet-friendly policies, right? Before we wrap up, do you have anything maybe a little more relaxing as we look forward to the weekend?
I do actually. For anyone looking to unwind by the water, here's something you won't want to miss. The Busan Sea Library is coming back next month.
Oh, really? So I'm assuming it's the outdoor reading event right by the beach, right?
Exactly. From June 14th to 29th, every Saturday and Sunday, Minlak Waterside Park, 민락수변공원 in Suyeonggu District will transform into a pop-up seaside library. Over 2,000 books will be available, spread across theme zones like dawn, waves, and light.
Oh, sounds so good. So that's a wrap for today's Now in Busan. Claire, thank you so much for coming in yesterday and today filling in for Sejin. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Bye.
Everybody, that was Claire once again, our newscaster. And we're going to now get to your traffic and weather. It's now 7:15. Let's take a look at the roads right now. It looks backed up on Dongso Overpass from Bomnukgo Ramp to the old Gaegeum Tollgate. Also congested on Gwanmun-daero from Bangeum Tunnel to Baegang Tunnel. There is traffic detected on Beonyeong-no going out of the city right around the Wondong Ramp. And it's also slow on Luno-Samsung-daero from Myeongji Underpass to Shino Bridge. As for the weather, it is currently 16 degrees Celsius under clear skies here in Busan. It's going to go up to 24 degrees. Clear skies across most of the country. However, some showers forecast for parts of Cheonnam and Gyeongnam. Looking ahead to the weekend, tomorrow, a low of 13, a high of 26. On Sunday, a low of 15 and an expected high of 28 degrees Celsius. Basically, a nice sunny weekend ahead. This was your traffic and weather. It's time for Top Stories. We have Haley in the studio. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's that day, our favorite day.
Yay. Happy Friday, everyone.
Indeed. Challenges. How do you like to challenge yourself?
I do like to, I've been on a health kick this week. I've been working out twice a day, eating clean, and it feels really good, but I'm so unhappy. I just want bread. All I want in life is bread.
Bread is good.
Yes, I'm going to challenge myself to eat a ton of bread after this week. But in any case, I kid. I like to run and I like to challenge myself by getting to my personal best and stuff. Not a big marathoner, not a big racer. Never. I don't think I will ever run a marathon, but not a huge racer. Just the crowds and the running kind of stresses me out. It's too overstimulating. But I would like to donate. I would like to challenge myself to give more. Yeah.
Wow, that's a good lofty goal. I like
I
it.
think I like it
Challenge.
too. Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing, Haley. We're going to get to our first story. We want the latest. We need the latest from the campaign trail.
Right. So you cover the voting, the election side of it. I'm going to cover what the candidates said and did yesterday. So starting with the Democratic Party's candidate, Lee Jae-myung, his message yesterday was the economy and kind of creating this image of himself as the capable economics president. So he said his presidency will reform the industrial structure of the country and establish this fair market order. So his byline was focusing on the stock market, said, quote, with 14 million ants, aka retail investors, Kemi, and 52 million citizens of Korea, they will get to Kospi 5,000, so boosting the stock market. He also vowed to breathe in new hope to the stock market that's been tied down by various risks, which has sometimes stopped the Korea discount. So that's Lee Jae-myung. Let's move on to Kim Moon-soo, the People Power Party or PPP candidate. He focused on communication. So the communications president was the picture he painted.
Okay.
Kim issued a statement saying that when times are hard, communication is a virtue that a president must have. However, what's worse is this was a thinly veiled attack at his opponent is autocracy, politics of propaganda and retaliation, suppression, and fear. So Kim vowed to open multiple channels of communications for the people if he becomes president and meet with the ruling party and opposition party leaders at least once every 2 months, along with the weekly media day.
I see. So that is what they're promising. As this is going on, an issue that has been dominating the news cycle for the past couple of days has been Lee Jun-seok's controversial comments from the debate. We covered it, but we need more details.
Right, because news continues to come out. So this is the latest controversy in the election. So for a bit of background, Lee Jun-seok during the last presidential debate, he repeated comments that Lee Jae-myung's son, Lee Dong-ho, allegedly wrote online, and this has to do with female genitalia. We're just going to leave that there. There was, of course, controversy over not just the comment itself, but the fact that Lee Jun-seok said it on air. And Lee Jun-seok did apologize on Wednesday. This is what we covered yesterday.
Yes.
However, after our program, he convened an emergency press conference at the National Assembly. There, he said that through legal documents and media reports, it's been confirmed that Lee Dong-ho, again, Lee Jae-myung's son, eldest son, made these lewd comments and was fined 5 million won for violation of the Information Networks Act. And Lee Jun-seok said that his question, when he asked this question on TV, it wasn't to be provocative, but it was a part of the vetting process for the other candidate. And he said that, in the past several years, the country's been struggling with former President Yoon Suk-yeol's wife, Kim Gon-hee, with this family scandal, and that the country cannot sit through another phase of chaos under the name of Kim Hae-kyung, that's Lee Jae-myung's wife, and Lee Dong-ho. So he's kind of tying these family issues together. And he actually asked, he doesn't understand what part of what he said during the debate was misogyny. And he also warned that he will be taking strong criminal and civil action against people who spread false information about him, warning them to apologize and delete such posts.
Well, we also need to hear about Lee Jae-myung's side about these accusations.
Right. So the Democratic Party continued its condemnation of Lee Jun-seok's. The party's election advisory panel said that what Lee Jun-seok said about Lee Dong-ho was publication of false information, and it's actually filing a police report.
Okay.
In the general progressive sphere, we're hearing a lot of condemnations, including the Rebuilding Korea Party and Democratic Labor Party candidate Kwon Young-guk. However, looking at the conservative side, the PPP kind of added to Lee Jun-seok's comments. It said that what Lee Jun-seok said was verbal assault and misogyny. However, Lee Jae-myung's son, whom the PPP says actually said those words, is the perpetrator, and he is the perpetrator of violence and hatred, and called for Lee Jae-myung to resign due to his continued family issues. The PPP actually launched an investigation team to look into these family matters.
So that's where we are on that issue.
Right.
Very hot topic. We're going to move on, entirely, something completely different. Weddings, we know, are not cheap. But for the first time ever, we have official data on this.
Earlier this week, we talked about how weddings are not cheap for people who are invited, who are going, right? 하객들. But, of course, people who are throwing the weddings, the parents and the couple, is not cheap. how not cheap? On average, to throw a wedding, you're going to need 21 million won. 2,100만 won is the going rate. And this is according to a survey by the Korea Consumer Agency over the wedding industry, some 500 venues. And these numbers have been disclosed for the first time ever.
Okay.
It's a part of the government's push to make weddings more reasonable and affordable in the larger population policy.
Yes.
So this wedding cost, it includes the venue, 식장 대관료, the food, 식대, and what we in Korea call 스드메, which is the photo shoot, the pre-wedding photo shoot, studio, dress, and makeup.
Yes.
All of which came to a little over 21 million. However, huge regional discrepancy. The most expensive area was in Gangnam. Not surprising, but the figure was 34 million won to throw a wedding there. 3,400만 won. And overall, it was 28 million won in Seoul. But then it was followed by Gyeonggi and Incheon. Makes sense, the general capital area. On the other hand, Busan was actually on the cheaper end. I believe second to the last at 12 million won, 1,200만 won. Right. Venue costs on average, they were the cheapest in Busan. 식장 계약 금액 at 8 million won.
Oh.
Yeah.
There's a big gap there.
Huge gap.
But, you know, there's so much fine print. Everything's like written real little. And it really does vary by, I guess, like when you get married.
There are so many options. So, and then peak season, 성수기, which
Yes.
in the wedding industry, that's October, May, April, and November. By the way, it's in that order. And venue fees were on average 4.5 million won more expensive. 450만 won 차이. That's just the difference. Most expensive venues on average were in Gangnam at 7 million won. Gwangju and Jeju were the cheapest at 1 million won on average. But the food was the most important and expensive part. The median per person cost was 58,000 won. 58,000 won. Yes.
So I'm doing the math in my head. You know, sometimes what we, give as,
Because that food cost it does always factor into how much you're giving. Because I've seen comments online like, oh, my friend's having a wedding at a hotel. I hear it's like, 100,000 won per plate. Do I also need to give more than that?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's also talk about this 스드메 that you
Right, so
mentioned.
the photo shoot, studio dress, and makeup. The median cost, studio photo shoots were 1.35 million won, dresses 1.55 million, makeup 760,000. But the more important part, hidden costs. Because sometimes the dress industry is insane, like the basic dresses, but if you want like a prettier dress, something by a more famous designer, there are costs to that. Makeup, if you are starting and if you want to get your makeup early, apparently the prime time is like sunrise, not to get your photo shoot, but to get your makeup done. So to do that, you need 200,000 won, 20만 won extra to call a makeup artist that early.
Yes.
And here's the thing though, 9 out of 10 companies surveyed didn't disclose their prices up front. And of course, we're not even talking about the hidden fees. We're talking about even the basic costs. And unfortunately, right now, it is not enforceable by law to make these companies do that. And there's currently a bill sitting at the National Assembly to regulate this.
Yes, and as Yeji PD님 points out, for people who get married, for like the ladies, the women, basically there is this kind of thinking like, oh,
Like it's my day. Also,
I get married, hopefully just,
Hopefully.
once. It could be twice, 3 times, not judging, right? But I mean, it's your special day. I want to spend a little bit more and look extra special. So, to each her own, we'll just say. Let's move on to some international news. We're going to get the latest on this whole Trump versus Harvard University situation.
Which is now expanding onto Trump versus universities.
Yes.
But let's look at the Harvard situation. On Wednesday local time, U.S. President Donald Trump, he said during a news conference that the Ivy League college, Harvard, should set a limit for how many international students it accepts. And he said it should be from 31% to 15%. That's slashing this in half. He stated that there are a lot of people who want to go to Harvard and other elite schools, and they cannot get in because, quote, we have foreign students there, unquote. That needs to be fact-checked. But by the way, for Harvard, the international students account for 27.7% of the student body.
Well, the U.S. government is taking specific measures.
Right, so this is something we've been covering this entire week. The State Department on Tuesday local time ordered U.S. embassies around the world and consulate offices to temporarily stop scheduling new student visa appointments. And then following that, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced the following day that the U.S. will begin revoking, which means canceling visas of Chinese students. Although he didn't specify how many, so it doesn't seem that they're going to revoke all Chinese students' visas, but they did say that this will be those with connections to the Chinese Communist Party or those who are studying in critical fields. And by the way, Chinese students make up the largest group of foreign students in the U.S. And the reason that this is important on our end, because we probably know people who want to go study abroad, but on the university's end, they are a major source of income, money, tuition.
Indeed.
Right.
Well, so far the bulk of the conflict has been between the Trump administration and Harvard. However, another school has been tapped as the next potential target.
Right. So a senior counsel and the head of the Justice Department's anti-Semitism task force singled out the University of California. So many implications there because geography, Harvard on the East Coast, UC, we're going all the way to the West Coast. So this is spanning the entire country. And University of California, so public universities are actually more vulnerable because they do get a larger bulk of their funding from being public universities, state and government funding. So in an interview with Fox News, the senior official Leo Terrell said there will be massive lawsuits against the UC system involving hate crime charges. Massive lawsuits against the UC could signal the first major fight against a state public university. With many of the major actions so far, they've been focused on private Ivy League schools.
Yes.
And Terrell also said that the administration is looking to bring these universities to their knees.
To their knees.
So, yeah, there's definitely war brewing on that front.
Yes. Well, thank you for covering all the news. We'll check in with you in hour number 2. Thank you, Haley.
See you in a bit.
We're going to get to our first song break for this Friday morning. Here is Roar by Katy Perry.
I used to bite my tongue and hold my breath, scared to rock the boat and make a mess. So I said quietly, agreed politely. I guess that I forgot I had a choice. I let you push me past the breaking point. I stood for nothing, so I fell for everything. You held me down, but I got up, already brushing off the dust. You hear my voice, you hear that sound, like thunder gonna shake the ground. You held me down, but I got up. Get ready, 'cause I've had enough.
Welcome back. Today we're talking about challenges, whether they're kind of like really big ones or smaller ones. Well, how do you want to challenge yourself? We have Edom Waver who says, I can't like do a marathon like other people, but the other activities I've done before or I'm still doing them even recently because some of the examples were like marathon or like hiking up like, some really high mountain or famous mountains or even, giving meaning donating, whether it's your time. Even some people, they grow their hair long on purpose and they donate that as well, usually to people who might be suffering from cancer. So that is one response. Other people have said this. Tommy says, for the big challenge, I try to go all out on my skills to design semiconductors, because that's just who he is, right? He's an engineer. For a minor one, he says, I try to work out to lose, he says, my fat, like his fat, right? So, whether major, minor, good luck to those challenges, tackling those challenges. Betty says a big one, probably a renovated home in the future for his family. And then small one, weight loss, he says. So I guess weight loss is kind of a common thread that I'm seeing right now. And for, in terms of the whole weight loss and the dieting thing, don't we make New Year's resolutions every January? Or, and then we go, okay, 설날, Lunar New Year, let's try again, right? So it's not just, Tommy or like Benny or even myself or our producers like laughing out so loud. I'm sure you heard her. Like, it's like again and again. 또다시. Get back on that bandwagon, as they say. It's okay. We can do it together. And we're going to get to Casey. He's in the studio. We'll be back with his segment in just a moment. It is time for Foreign Press Highlights. We have Casey in the studio, looking so bright and shiny on this Friday morning. Good morning.
Angelic, even.
You're calling yourself angelic?
Not personality-wise. Certainly not that. Just in appearance. Very bright. Yes. Good morning.
You look fantastic, of course.
Thank you.
Once again, wearing the neutrals.
Yeah.
Because,
yeah, right.
Yeah, blending in with a background.
Yeah.
I'm a chameleon. Blending in with the curtains.
Yes. Yeah. Your variations of that.
Yes.
Gradation.
It's difficult, like finding, colors to avoid. Like,
I know,
mentally
right?
you're just like, can't wear that. Like,
Right.
Like a little checklist. But
I definitely do not blend into the background today. I'm boop.
yes, you look good in
Poppin'.
white.
Popping white.
Yeah, with the little soft stripes going on.
This is my challenge to myself.
That's your challenge?
How to appear brighter.
I
Success.
see. Do you have any other serious challenges?
Oh, yeah.
Something that you're tackling.
Man, I was listening as you talk about that, and people were talking about like hiking a mountain or doing some kind of extreme like sport challenge.
Yes.
Just exercise in general. I find to be like just actually following some kind of exercise routine. Period.
Yes.
I can't do it. I'll do it for like a week, and then I'm like, my shoulder's sore, and then I just, I better not exercise anymore for 3 months.
Oh, so Casey is not tak심 3일, it's like tak심 7일. Like for a week, you're good.
Yeah, like I could do like a solid week and I'll actually like feel better about myself. I'm like, yeah, I'm dedicated. And then
Yes. All right. Well, we're going to jump into the stories that you have brought for our listeners. So let's explain our segment for anybody who might be new tuning in. What is Foreign Press Highlights?
Okay, so in Foreign Press Highlights, we're going to look at some stories about Korea from outside Korea. So typically, larger international publications often have things about Korea, but I also like to, when possible, find some maybe under the radar, some less reported stories. But this week, you could probably guess there is a very big common theme about Korea. We'll get to that second.
Okay.
The election is big news, so we'll talk about that a little bit. But I also wanted to kind of update us on a story we've talked about quite a bit as it developed, all about the adoptees and, what has been discovered about, how they were treated. And so the big news this week concerning that story was from the Associated Press. And the headline is Mom Sues After Learning Her Missing Son Was Adopted Out of South Korea. So this is big news because it's there haven't been that many lawsuits yet. And this is probably the third. And so what happened was 72-year-old Choi Young-ja filed a lawsuit against South Korea's government and the largest adoption agency here. And in the lawsuit, she alleges that there were systematic failures that resulted in her forced separation from her toddler son at the time, who was sent to Norway without her consent.
Oh.
She actually searched for her son for about 5 decades before finding him. And they had an emotional reunion in 2023.
5 decades,
Yeah.
50 years.
Yeah, so she didn't give up.
I
And
can't imagine.
Yeah, right.
I do want to know, though, and I'm sure our listeners are wondering, how were they separated in the first place?
Yeah, so this article particularly goes over her story. There have been a lot of stories that have been reported on in the past, and hers is the details are what or make it different. She recalls the story with a lot of vivid detail. She says in July 1975, her son was 3 years old, and he ran out of their home in Seoul. And this, if you've ever seen the movie Chingu, it just immediately presents that scene. She says he went to chase a cloud of insecticide sprayed by a fumigation truck while playing with friends. So if anybody's ever seen that movie, that's exactly what you see as the movie starts. But the problem was he never came back. So she and her husband spent years searching for him. They went to police stations all around Seoul. They brought posters with his name and photos, specifically to Holt, which was South Korea's largest adoption agency.
Yes.
And they were repeatedly told there was no information about him.
Wow. So we're going to fast forward.
Yeah.
How did she find him?
So, as I said, it took 5 decades. She made like a final effort by submitting her DNA to a police unit that specifically was created to help reunite adoptees with birth families. And it took a little more help than that. She got help from a group called 325 Camera. And that's a volunteer group that helps adoptees find their birth families using DNA. So obviously that's something that's been done more recently. It couldn't have been done in the past.
Okay.
So she found out that her son had been adopted to Norway in December 1975. So that's only 5 months after he went missing. So that's very fast. And the adoption had been handled by the Holt agency, the same one she had personally visited countless times. But she found out that the adoption was done with a different name and with a different photograph. And I was just thinking, as a mother, as a parent myself, what do you think you would do if you found that out? Like, I just wouldn't even know what to do.
Beyond devastation, like enraged,
Yeah.
sad, and just a myriad of just a ton of emotions. I'm assuming.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they said. She was enraged, and she actually went to confront the Holt agency about it. And since that time, she worked with lawyers to prepare her lawsuit against not only the agency, but the South Korean government and another orphanage in the city of Suwon, where her son actually stayed before he was being transferred to Holt.
Yes. So, what was the Suwon orphanage's role in this?
Yeah, so basically, like Holt, they had the same obligation to try to verify the child's status and notify his parents that they had discovered him. And they said at the time her son was actually old enough to speak and showed obvious signs of having a family. So Holt then went on to actually falsify the records to describe him as an abandoned orphan. And even though Trey had actually visited the agency looking for him while he was in their custody.
Really?
Right. So, because remember, that was like a short span of time. It was only 5 months before he was put on a flight to Norway.
I mean, that is like flabbergasting. It flabbergasts me because, everything you said allegedly is pretty terrible.
Right.
But the fact that she went to the agency while her child was there, and they still said, no, we don't know. We've never heard of him.
Right.
So why is she suing the government?
Right. So the government's role in this, according to her lawsuit, is that they failed in their legal duty to identify Trey's son after he arrived at an orphanage. So the government apparently has some role in that. And she also did file an immediate police report, so there should have been some follow-up on that. And she says the government also failed to verify his guardianship as he was being processed through a state-controlled foreign adoption system. So there's 3 companies or 3 groups that are liable, according to her lawsuit.
Yes. Well, according to this article, does she have a chance of winning?
This is the part that's not clear.
Okay.
So one of the first lawsuits against not only the Korean government, but against the Holt Adoption Agency was in 2019. And that was filed by Adam Krapser, who was the first Korean adoptee to sue the government. And he accused both of mishandling his adoption to the U.S. because his parents did not actually get him citizenship. And he said, that's what resulted in him being actually deported from the U.S. in 2016.
Yes.
So unfortunately for him, in January, the Seoul High Court said that both the government and Holt Agency were not liable for this. And that overturned a lower court ruling that said the agency had to pay damages for his situation. So if you look at that, it kind of looks like there's a good chance that she might not win. But again, the allegations in Trey's lawsuit are quite different than the 2019 lawsuit. This is alleging there's falsification of records, not following legal procedures, and if that's proven, it seems to be hard to imagine that she would not win her lawsuit.
Right, and several years back, I think we even interviewed Adam Krapser on our show.
Right.
So I distinctly remember a story.
I remember talking about it as well.
Right, it was such a unique story because, he had been adopted, his family had not gone through with getting himself, U.S. citizenship.
Right.
And then he was just in limbo.
Right.
And then so definitely, that's a tough story. And
For
it's
sure.
Unfortunately probably too common of a story as well.
Well, that's what we'll see too. Depending on how this lawsuit turns out, we might see a lot more lawsuits like this.
Yes. All right, we got to move to our second story. What's it about?
Okay, as I said, this story has been widely reported this week, and I think will continue to be so in international outlets.
Okay.
It's all about the vote coming up. However, this was a particularly different take on the vote. A lot of the stories kind of cover the same material. Who are the candidates? The New York Times says in the headline, as South Korea gets ready to vote, women don't like the choices.
Oh,
that's very blatant.
That's the title.
That's the title.
New York Times. Okay.
Yeah. So they say right under the headline, women took the lead in the protests against South Korea's last president, but the men running to replace him are saying little about the discrimination they face. So
Interesting.
It's a very pointed article. Very pointed.
And so what does the New York Times mean by took the lead in the protests?
Right. Okay. So to get into the specifics of that, basically what they say that right off the bat, young South Korean women are often dismissed by men as being apolitical. However, young South Korean women were prominent in the movement to impeach former President Yoon Suk-yeol, whom they accused of encouraging contempt and even hatred for women. So they were among, when they say they, women were among the first to take to the streets to condemn Mr. Yoon's short-lived imposition of martial law in December. And they also were the ones that enlivened large rallies with K-pop songs and glow sticks, which made it a very unique kind of protest.
True. I mean, that was covered around the world, the type of protest, right? So what was the motivation for women, according to this article, to be so involved in these protests?
So Hannah Kim is a political scientist at Chinju National University of Education. She recently had a study published by the East Asia Institute about this. And what came out in the study is that basically women in their 20s were the most highly represented group in these rallies calling for Mr. Yoon's ouster, while men of that age in their 20s were largely, quote-unquote, silent and cynical. So the visible protesters were women, and one of the women they talked to in the article is named Jang Hyun-ji. She's 28 and a digital comics artist. And she said, for us, women that is, it was very personal. We joined the rallies against him not only because of the martial law undermining democracy, but also because he became president by encouraging hatred and discrimination against women. So that was the feeling largely represented in the article.
I see. And does the Times say anything about the discrimination against women, their take on it?
Yeah, they get into specifics. They say, basically June 3rd's coming up. There's a lot of preparation to elect a replacement for the president. A lot of women say that their priorities, which are largely making the country safer and fairer for them, are not really being talked about. They're taking a back seat. And this is not the first time in their experience. What they mentioned is basically there's a lot of gender-based discrimination. For example, on average, South Korean women are paid 31% less than men. That's the widest gap in the developed world. Women hold less than a fifth of legislative seats, just 3 of the government's 29 top positions, and 14.6% of senior corporate management roles. And you might be thinking, well, Okay, what do we compare that to?
Yes.
So the average among wealthy nations is at 33.8% for corporate management roles. So it's quite a difference.
Yes.
But they say in this article, kind of again and again, addressing these kinds of issues has become a very politically delicate subject in South Korea.
Why, though?
So basically, as they say in the article, with the economy in a slump, as they put it, and jobs being scarce, a lot of young men consider themselves victims of what they call reverse discrimination, and any kind of hint of any feminist agenda in government is bristled at. So Mr. Yoon and his right-wing People Power Party, they say in the article, leveraged such sentiments to win the young male vote and the presidency in 2022. And actually, during his campaign, he did say that there was no structural discrimination against women in South Korea. That has kind of been discussed to a degree,
yes,
but not much by the present candidates.
And so, does the times do they go into what might change with the new administration?
Yeah,
I mean, are women still turning out to vote?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? So if you feel you don't have any choices, why vote? So they talked to Park Ji-ah, who leads the Gender Equality Education Center in Seoul. And she says, we only have poor options in this election. Sure, many women will vote for Lee Jae-myung, but not because they expect him to be a great leader for women, but because they're desperate to keep the other side from power and stop the regression.
Oh. So it's not necessarily a vote for, it's kind of a vote against a certain party.
Yeah, that's the perspective, that's shown in the article here. And they do point out, all 6 presidential candidates are men. There's not one woman running for president this time. And they do say, Lee Jae-myung and the left-wing Democratic Party are being careful at the same time not to provoke male voters with any messages that could be seen as feminist, because that is something that kind of was a backlash against the previous president before Yoon Suk-yeol.
Yes. And here in Korea, the whole word like feminism is a very,
divisive
different.
word.
It's divisive, and it's very different from how the word feminism is viewed in maybe other English-speaking parts of the world.
And I think that's a big part of the article. This is the New York Times. They're explaining it to an American audience largely.
Yes.
And they do kind of say that again and again. Like feminism is just like a word that is really not used here. Yeah.
It is
people
different.
are kind of afraid to use that word.
Yes. So to wrap things up for this story, do women feel like, still that their vote counts, that they have a voice?
Yeah, so they talk to a lot of women in the article, different ages. They talked to a college student named Jung Eun-byul. She says, women like me will never vote for a candidate of the PPP. That makes the Democratic Party treat us like fish already caught. So in other words, she feels like that since we have no other choice, the other party really doesn't have to meet our demands.
Like their votes don't have to be wooed.
Exactly. Right. So a lot of women do say, according to this article, that no one in the race really clearly deserves their support. At the same point, Kim Do-won is 28, and she says, we don't have any other option other than to trust and vote for Mr. Lee. And if he's not doing well after his election, we can protest again. And that's a big point of this article, is that women have proven to be a big political force in the recent situation.
Well, of course, these are certain women that were interviewed. They don't represent all women.
Of course,
and,
right.
Votes, vote your conscience.
That's right.
You're going to vote for who you're going to vote for. So thank you for giving us a very interesting take from the New York Times on what's happening with the election, a different angle. So it's very different from the domestic angles, which is why we love this segment. So have a wonderful weekend. And of course, we'll check in with you next Friday. Thank you, Casey.
Have a great weekend.
Yes. All right, everybody. We have much more coming up in hour number 2, including our special interview where we're going to be focusing on the details, on the policies, on the pledges proposed by the major candidates in this election. Of course, once again, early voting is continuing right now till 6 p.m. Let's get to our final song for hour number 1, 네모의 꿈 by IU. Enjoy. I'll be back at 8.
네모난 침대에서 일어나 눈을 떠보면 네모난 창문으로 보이는 똑같은 풍경 네모난 문을 열고 네모난 테이블에 앉아 네모난 스마트폰 본 뒤 네모난 책가방 네모난 책들을 넣고 네모난 버스를 타고 네모난 건물 지나 네모난 학교에 들어서면 또 네모난 교실 네모난 칠판과 책상들 네모난 오디오 네모난 컴퓨터 TV 네모난 달력에 그려진 똑같은 하루를 회식도 못한 채로 그냥 숨만 쉬고 있는 걸 주위 둘러보면 모두 네모난 것들 뿐인데 우린 언제나 듣지 잘난 어른의 멋진 힘을 세상은 둥글게 살아야 해 지구본을 보면 우리 사는 지금 누군데 부속품들은 왜 다 온통 네모난 건지 몰라 어쩌면 그건 네모의 꿈일지 몰라 네모난 아버지의 지갑에 네모난 지폐 네모난 팜플렛에 그려진 네모난 학원 네모난 마루에 걸려있는 네모난 액자와 네모난 명함의 이름들 네모난 스피커 위에 놓인 네모난 테이프 네모난 책장에 꽂혀있는 네모난 사전 네모난 서랍 속에 쌓여있는 네모난 편지 이젠 네모 같은 추억들 네모난 태극기 하늘로 빗발라기고 네모난 잡지에 그려진 이달의 웃음은 희망 없는 나에게 그나마의 기쁨인가 봐 주위 둘러보면 모두 네모난 것들 뿐인데 우린 언제나 듣지 잘난 어른의 멋진 힘을 세상은 둥글게 살아야 해 지구본을 보면 우리 사는
현대해상 모델 이정재입니다. 인생은 계속해서 모양을 바꾸죠. 혼자에서 가족으로 또 사회로 점점 커져가는 당신의 인생을 따라 당신의 어떤 인생도 감싸주는 마음 넓은 보험이 될 수 있도록 마음이 합니다. 현대해상.
선을 하나 넘었을 뿐인데 익숙한 세상이 아름답게 다가옵니다. 야외 조각 공원과 함께 세계 각국 초청 작가들의 전시가 지그재그 아트센터에서 당신을 기다립니다. 예술은 직선을 걷지 않는다. 지그재그 아트센터.
혹시 지금 운전 중이신가요? 어린이 교통사고 피해자 수는 지난 3년 평균 약 9만 명. 특히 어린이 보호구역 안전기준이 강화된 이후에도 어린이 보호구역 내 사고는 지속적으로
play a song that will touch hearts around the world together with global fans. 문화와 바다가 만나는 도시 부산. 열정과 희망이 가득한 글로벌 관광 허브 도시 부산. 글로벌 K-pop 팬들이 하나 되는 축제 부산 원아시아 페스티벌. 한류 콘텐츠의 심장이 부산에서 뜁니다. The place where the Korean wave begins. a cultural hub blending tradition and innovation. 늘 새롭고 머물고 싶고 다시 찾고 싶은 도시 부산. Play, work, live, 부산. 이 캠페인은 부산의 관광 가치를 창조하는 글로벌 플랫폼 부산관광공사와 함께합니다.
The weather is so nice today. I'm sure this won't be a big deal.
A 3-second long lapse in judgment can burn up an entire mountain, which will take 100 years to recover. We can protect these lush forests if you follow these guidelines. First, do not bring flammable materials to the mountains. Second, do not cook or camp in the mountains. Third, do not litter cigarette butts. Your small actions are the first step towards protecting the beautiful forest. This campaign is brought to you by BEFM 부산영어방송.
김밥가게 박 사장님도 문구점 김 사장님도 우리 부산의 경제를 움직이는 사람들. 우리 동네 작은 가게로 향하는 발걸음이 우리 부산의 경제를 키워가는 한 걸음입니다. 부산 방송광고 발전 협의회.
The time is now 8 o'clock. This is hour number 2 of Morning Wave in Busan. We're going to begin with Spotlight News. Early voter turnout hits record high on first day. An all-time high of 19.58% of voters cast their ballots yesterday on the first day of early voting for the June 3rd presidential election. Jeonnam had the highest voter turnout at 34.96%, with Daegu the lowest at 13.42%. Busan's early voter turnout was 17.21%, below the national average. Democratic Party or DP's Lee Jae-myung, People Power Party or PPP's Kim Mun-soo, the Reform Party's Lee Jun-seok, and Democratic Labor Party's Kwon Young-guk. They all voted early yesterday, along with former presidents Moon Jae-in and Park Geun-hye, all urging voters to go to the polls early. Today is the last day of early voting, with polling stations open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. across the nation. Navy patrol aircraft crashes, killing 4 officers. A Navy maritime patrol craft crashed on a mountain in Pohang yesterday, killing all 4 officers on board. The P-3 maritime patrol aircraft took off at 1:43 p.m. and crashed some 6 minutes later, according to the Navy, due to an unspecified reason. It has retrieved the bodies of all 4 officers. The Navy said it has launched an investigative unit to look into further details and grounded the P-3 maritime patrol aircraft. This accident marks the first known crash involving a P-3 aircraft deployed by the armed services. BOK cuts key rate to 2.5% amid a dim growth forecast. The Bank of Korea, or BOK, lowered its benchmark interest rate by a quarter percentage point to 2.5% yesterday in an effort to prop up economic growth amid sluggish domestic demand and uncertainties coming from the U.S. In a statement, the central bank said that although concerns about household debt growth and an increase in volatility of foreign exchange markets persist, the board thought it was appropriate to cut the rate in the face of a lowered economic growth forecast. BOK Governor Lee Chang-yong added that the further rate cuts could be larger than expected given the economic situation, although he refused to comment on by how much or how many times the central bank is mulling on cutting rates. Government presents additional flood prevention measures ahead of summer. The government yesterday put forth additional flood prevention measures ahead of the summer season, following up on a comprehensive package of preventive steps announced just 2 weeks ago. According to officials, the government will improve the current evacuation system for residents affected by rising levels of rivers and streams during torrential rains to take shelter under a flood advisory, utilize AI to decide on dam releases, and commission an expert. The Environment Ministry says an annual average of 13 people have lost their lives due to floods during the past decade, with property damage totaling 257.9 billion won. U.S. court temporarily reinstates Trump's tariffs. An appeals court has agreed that Trump's tariffs could remain in place while an appeal hearing by the Trump administration is going on, giving the administration a temporary victory. This comes a day after a U.S. trade court ruled that the tariff regime was illegal, giving the White House 10 days to halt the taxes. The White House said it is ready to take its appeal to the Supreme Court and that the administration is working to tackle rogue judges. And this was Spotlight News.
The Korea Broadcast Advertising Cooperation (KOBACO) is offering support for the production of broadcast advertisements for innovative small and medium-sized enterprises. Up to 45 million Korean won is available for television advertisements and up to 3 million Korean won for radio advertisements. Applications will be accepted until 6 p.m. on June 2nd. For more information, please visit the KOBACO website. We appreciate your interest.
It's time for Waga Waga, which means Haley's back in the studio with us. Welcome back.
Good morning again.
Yes. We're going to dive into our first story. Let's talk about something that people are very sensitive about, smoking.
Right.
Or specifically secondhand smoke.
Right. The reason I'm talking about this, by the way, is because we have World No Tobacco Day coming up. So the government is going to actively promote its policy to help people quit smoking. So first, we're going to talk about 간접흡연, secondhand smoking, which is all of a sudden on the rise. So according to the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, KDCA 질병청 survey over non-smokers, secondhand smoke exposure rate came to 8% for the workplace, which makes you wonder, why are you getting secondhand smoke exposure at your work?
Like how?
Exactly. Where? So that rate has been going down consistently from 14% back in 2019 all the way to 6% in 2020. But in 2023, rebounded, jumping to 8%. Also, there's been an uptick in non-smokers getting exposed to secondhand smoke in public places. There's one street here in Centum City. I won't name where, but it's like not too far from the station, where it is that entire building comes down onto that street to smoke, and I'm just like, ugh, my lungs. Anyways, it went from 7% in the past few years to 8.6% again in 23. At home, also a similar pattern of increase, although the figure was lower at 3%.
Interesting that the pattern at home was lower than, in public areas.
Right.
Well, let's talk about the dangers of secondhand smoke.
Right. So secondhand smoking is when there are two types when you inhale smoke from someone else's smoking. So first, there is the mainstream smoke. It's called 주류연. That's basically the smoke that comes out of the smoker's mouth. And then there's the side stream, 부류연, which is the smoke that comes out from the tip of the cigarette. And then both of these types of smokes, they're known to have 69 types of carcinogens. Those are agents that can create cancer. It not only affects your cancer risks, but also your cardiovascular health. According to the KDCA, they're actually citing U.S. reports here. In the United States, 46,000 people die each year from secondhand smoking, which is a massive number.
Yes.
And we don't have that figure for South Korea. However, I do have this figure, a survey in South Korea by the University of Ulsan, commissioned by the Health Ministry. 8 out of 10, so it's 80% of e-cigarette or vape, 전자담배 users, they apparently secretly smoked indoors or in no smoking spots.
Oh, really?
And I've walked into an empty classroom and a certain colleague of mine was doing that. I'm like, And let me give you a little bit of statistics that we have from the authorities on effects of course, direct smoking. 70,000 people die from direct smoking each year in South Korea. And the social cost, 13 trillion won. So speaking of challenges, which is why I kind of brought this up, a lot of people do challenge themselves to smoke less or quit smoking. And definitely this hopefully would be a motivator.
Oh, I hope so, certainly. Well, let's move on. Our next two stories are actually mountain related.
Right. So this first one, it's a terrifying force of Mother Nature. A glacial avalanche destroyed an entire village in Switzerland. This alpine village called Blatten. The authorities are looking for one missing man, but thankfully the bulk of almost all of the 300-person village evacuated earlier this month because geologists monitoring the area, they warned that the glacier appeared unstable. So a large section of what's called the Birch Glacier collapsed Wednesday afternoon local time, and there was an avalanche of mud sweeping over the village. In footage I saw, there was deafening, crashing roars sweeping down the valley. Geologists say that they've been warning for years that some alpine towns, so towns around the Alps, they could be at risk. And another village in eastern Switzerland had to evacuate 2 years ago, and they haven't been able to go back. So the mayor of this town said the unimaginable has happened, but promised the village still has a future. The local authorities are on their way to the scene to respond to it. However, according to the head of the regional office for Swiss's National Hazards Office, said that further evacuations may be necessary.
I see. Well, while this is going on, it's happening at least partially due to climate change.
Right. So anytime a glacier has an unexpected movement, it's probably due to climate change has been the pattern thus far. The most recent report into the condition of Switzerland's glaciers, they suggested that they can be all gone within a century. It's only 100 years. If global temperatures cannot be kept within a rise of 1.5 degrees Celsius. And then many climate scientists suggest that the target already has been missed at 1.5, meaning that the glacier melting or thaw will continue to accelerate. And of course, that includes risks of flooding, landslides, and threats to these communities.
Well, thank you for shedding light onto not just this one area, but the fact that this is happening all over. Next, mountain related, countless people have attempted and some have succeeded in climbing the world's tallest peak, Mount Everest. But this group did it in just 3 days as opposed to 3 weeks or even months. And the big question is, how did they do it?
Right. So some people their dream is to climb Mount Everest. And that's kind of been the ultimate conquest for humanity. However, there's now controversy of climbing performance doping.
Oh, no.
Performance enhancement substances. So this is a controversy in the world of climbing. A team of British climbers scaled Mount Everest in 3 days, which is one of the fastest records. And that included actually travel time from their home to Mount Everest and back to their homes in the UK. For most climbers, a large portion of the climbing journey is the time they spend at base camp. Although base is a relative word because that base camp on Mount Everest is 5,364 meters above sea level. Let me give you a bit of reference. Baekdusan, Mount Baekdu, tallest peak in the Korean Peninsula, 2,744 meters. So that's like almost 2 of Baekdusan. By the way, in Busan, locally, Kumjeongsan, Godangbong, the peak is 800 meters. Which seems so cute compared to it. But I mean, I'm not climbing that anytime soon. Mount Everest itself, 8,849 meters above sea level.
Yes.
The reason they spend so much time at base camp is altitude sickness, 고산병, because it's so tall, it's so above sea level, there's low oxygen and low pressure conditions that they need to adjust their bodies to.
They need to acclimate, right? At base camp for a while. But you said that these British climbers kind of bypass this. So the big question is how?
Exactly. Do they have lungs of iron? No, they just put gas in themselves. It's called xenon or xenon gas, which is a rare, colorless, odorless, and tasteless noble gas found in very small amounts naturally in the atmosphere. However, some researchers, and please keep in mind this has not been scientifically proven, inhaling xenon activates a molecule called HIF, which it triggers your body to adjust to high altitudes. So when activated, this increases production of red blood cells and improves oxygen delivery throughout your body. So you can actually breathe with there being, less amounts of oxygen in the air.
Okay.
So it helps with the adjustment, with the acclimatization. So a particular team reportedly inhaled carefully administered doses of xenon gas in Germany, combined with weeks of sleeping in specialized tents, and that can stimulate these high altitude conditions.
So let's talk about why this is controversial.
Right, because it's kind of akin to doping or performance enhancement drugs. And critics say that this could commercialize Mount Everest even more, because that's one of the environmental issues, and really diminished, because the whole point of climbing Mount Everest is not just to stake your flag there and take a picture, but it's what it does to you emotionally, physically. It's pushing yourself, challenging yourself. So if you're doing that in 3 days with help of gas, then what's the point? That's kind of been the argument.
Yes.
So Nepal's tourism department also said that the use of xenon gas is against climbing ethics, because Everest, once again, is a test of endurance, patience, and respect for nature. Also, scientifically, International Climbing and Mountaineering Federation warned that xenon gas has no proven benefits, and it could even pose health risks. However, this individual who led the British team, he actually says there are practical benefits, like the number of days one could realistically take off from work. Because your boss probably isn't going to give you 2 months off so you could go scale Mount Everest. Also, environmental benefits, he argues, because most of the environmental issues we do see on Mount Everest is from the base camps, where human waste accounts for a huge portion. So he argues that this could reduce such waste by 75%.
Indeed. So I do see why the criticism is there for using a xenon. All right. We're going to go back to the election for our last story, where a very huge trend is spreading across social media.
Right. So a way for voter 인증샷 to prove that you voted. Typical way is to stamp the back or the palm of your hand. But the more prepared, the more millennial and Gen Z, I know now I'm separating them all, this voter verification or proof printouts are the new trend. And you can actually get a ton of, as you can see on our YouTube page, a ton of designs on social media if you search them under 투표 인증. So it uses photos of celebrities, even baseball teams. It says like your team Lotte, and then instead of 우, it only has the 우, the vowel with the O missing. So you stamp the O, 우승. And then, that one's me from last year during the general elections. Yeah, so I did the little I voted thing.
Yes.
Others make their own, draw it themselves, using photos of their pets. One newspaper in Jeonnam actually printed one of these on the front page of their newspaper yesterday, so readers can just cut it out and go to the polls. This is cute, but it's not just about cute or kitschy, because it first came about briefly out of concern during the COVID pandemic, because stamping your hand during the pandemic when we all had to wear those gloves, well, that was there were concerns that the virus could spread that way. So back then, some people ask for voter certification cards or sheets at the polling station, and they do give them to you in case you have to submit it to work. But of course, other people didn't want to ask for them, so people started making their own.
Okay.
And these, along with the hand stamps, and in the U.S. there are the I voted stickers, they all play a role in encouraging voter turnout.
Yes. Tommy says, PD님, 모닝웨이브로 하나 만들어요. is a request, but we can't get political, so we're just gonna say there's a lot of cute ones.
But
you can
go
find
vote is not political.
Of course not. So get the vote out. Thank you, Haley. We'll check in with you on Monday.
I know. Have a great weekend.
All right, everybody. This was Haley once again with Waga Waga. Let's get to your traffic and weather. Let's take a look at the traffic situation. There was an accident on Bunyeonglo going out of the city right around Wondong Ramp. It has been cleared, but there's still backup. It is congested on Gwangan Bridge on the upper part of the bridge. It's backed up on Mandakdero from Sukdung to Deokjeon intersection. There's also some traffic on Yeonsuro from Mangmi-goge to Silli three-way intersection. And it's also slow going on Gayadero from Daenjeong Station to Jure intersection. Currently it's 16 degrees Celsius under clear skies here in Busan. The daytime high will go up to 24 degrees Celsius. Clear skies across most of the country, but showers are forecast for parts of Jeonnam and Gyeongnam. For the weekend, we can expect a nice sunny weekend on Saturday. Tomorrow, a low of 13 and a high of 26. And on Sunday, you can expect a low of 15 and a high of 28. And this was your traffic and weather. It's time for a special interview on this Friday morning. Following the impeachment of former President Yoon Suk-yeol, the date for the 21st presidential election is on June 3rd. It's coming up next Tuesday. It's also known as the Rose election. As the election approaches rapidly, the three leading candidates are intensifying their campaigns to secure voter support. We have Lee Jae-myung of the Democratic Party, Kim Moon-soo of the People Power Party, and Lee Jun-suk of the Reform Party. Those are the three frontrunners. And today we want to kind of unpack the major policy pledges of each candidate to better understand how their leadership could shape the nation moving forward. Let's find out more. We have invited back to the airwaves Professor Kim Byung-ju, former diplomat and affiliate professor of Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Let's say hi to him. Hi, welcome back, Professor.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me back.
Yes, absolutely. Professor, we want to go through the main pledges, the policies that are being proposed by each of the candidates. So we're going to go in order as we always do. First, we're going to begin with Lee Jae-myung.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely critical for us, the voters, to understand the key policies of these candidates, because basically what we are doing is we are voting for their policies, supposedly. They're the policymakers, and then they will be implementing their key policies that will benefit us and serve us here. However, though, having said that, while we need to go through key policies pledged, it's important for us to understand the overall package. Mm-hmm. Policy package is the most central, essential, critical part that we are basically kind of buying with our votes, basically. But the thing is, where this policy package is coming from is very important. The whole thing about the candidate. And so in that sense, if I may, if we start talking about Lee Jae-myung, in the eyes of Lee Jae-myung's supporters, what he stands for are very critical elements. And from this background, his key policies and service for the people will be coming from. So what is his background overall in terms of what his supporters see? He's coming from a very humble personal background. He didn't obtain a regular education, and he went up the ladder through taking exams, qualifications, and certificates, and he became a lawyer altogether. And this shows the possibility of class mobility for this country. and which is a very important system reliability, people's trust in the system. So from those kind of background, we can expect what kind of policies will be coming from after this, after he enters the office, if he ever gets elected.
Yes.
And besides, the policy package itself will have to be continuously developed. This is a second time we have this. That is, we have an election, and immediately after the election, the result is announced. The presidential team will have to develop their policy details because we don't have a transition here, right?
Right.
And we have this before under Moon-jae-in. So this kind of background really matters. And his background, for instance, in the eyes of supporters, he's the fighter who has upheld Korean democracy by playing key role in the impeachment of Park Geun-hye several years ago. And then he has fought for impeachment of Yoon Suk-yeol again. So in the eyes of his supporters, he is the one who fights for democracy, upholding democracy altogether. And he has shown a great leadership in the eyes of, again, his supporters of consolidating the unity of the Democratic Party. That shows his leadership quality, where he can introduce strong policies and implement them properly. And most importantly, in the eyes of the supporters, his track record as the mayor of Seongnam City and the governor of Gyeonggi Province. He has quite an impressive track record of someone who delivered the results, policy results. So these backgrounds are very important in understanding the policies that will come through. So far, he hasn't really made a great splash in terms of like introducing whole new policies. But these are the background where he's coming from. But at the same time, having talked about the views of his supporters, we have to talk about the views of his critics.
Yes.
That is, in the eyes of his critics, Lee Jae-myung is a ruthless realist and a person who seem to believe the end justifies the means. He has come back through all these political fights, and the criminal charges have been dealt with by him in interesting ways that amaze the critics. And in the eyes of critics, they're concerned how he will actually deal with the rule of law going forward. In the eyes of the critics, what they're mindful of is like what happened to Trump after his first term. He faced all these criminal charges and he found a way to come back to the political stage.
Right.
And now what he's doing is doing all these things kind of like against the rule of law and treating rule of law very, very lightly and setting aside rule of law altogether. So that's why in the eyes of the critics, they see a great concern about possibility of Lee Jae-myung acting as a strong man who will set aside rule of law and to tighten the personal control over the government as it did in the case of Democratic Party. And in the eyes of the critics, they see these concerns of the possible setback for Korean democracy. So this mixed picture, the different views of the supporters and the different on one hand and then critics on the other, together they will result in certain policy directions and implementation styles and his future course in terms of his struggle in dealing with the public as well as lawmakers and the politicians and so on. Of course, lawmaking body itself is tightly controlled by Democratic Party, the party of his own. So his prospect is much brighter than what Yoon Suk-yeol faced. Yoon Suk-yeol was not able to introduce any of his major policy initiatives in the form of new law, and his government was paralyzed in his own expression. But this time, Lee Jae-myung will face a much better situation where he can actually instantaneously implement his policies in the form of new law. And so with his known leadership and drive, much is expected on the side of supporters. But at the same time, on the side of critics, there is a great concern as well.
Indeed. And if we can touch upon Kim Moon-soo and his pledges as well.
Well, Kim Moon-soo's case, similar to Lee Jae-myung's case, the campaign period has been short, and the promises he has made, not much stands out. I mean, for example, he's been talking about creating an environment where entrepreneurship will prosper, businesses will prosper, and AI will be strengthened. These are quite similar to what Lee Jae-myung had said, basically. So there isn't that much of distinction. But in terms of again, to understand what's coming to us in the future, rather than what has been put on the table, which doesn't tell us much about these policy differences, but what's coming in our way if Kim Moon-soo gets elected, in the eyes of supporters, what they see is very principle-based approach to governing, basically.
Yes.
And Kim Moon-soo has dealt with the concerns of the ultra-conservatives who have supported Yoon Suk-yeol, and Yoon Suk-yeol's problems that Yoon Suk-yeol had. Kim Moon-soo sees the same way with regard to the legislature being controlled by the opposition party, all this government paralysis that this conservative People Power Party has faced. He shares the same view, and he will have to deal with what they call hubris of the Democratic Party and what they call the left-wing distortion of the system altogether.
Yes.
And so in doing so, in the eyes of his supporters, he will uphold the conservative values and principles, and he will go forward. And in the eyes of his supporters, what they're mindful of is quite similar to what we talked about Lee Jae-myung's case on the opposite side, because Kim Moon-soo actually served as a Gyeonggi governor.
Right.
And his side team argues that the reason, if the Democratic Party, is arguing that Lee Jae-myung did a good job as a Gyeonggi governor, that's because Kim Moon-soo had laid the foundation for his success as his predecessor. And Kim Moon-soo has laid out all these pro-business, pro-economy, economic growth foundations for Gyeonggi province. That's why Lee Jae-myung succeeded. So in the eyes of his supporters, Kim Moon-soo comes in with a great track record as a successful governor of Gyeonggi province as well. That's what they have in mind. Having said that, but in the eyes of the critics of Kim Moon-soo, basically, to quote them, Kim Moon-soo is a liar. He broke the promise on Prime Minister Han Duck-soo. He came to obtain the party ticket with the promise that he will merge with the former Prime Minister, producing a unified ticket. But in the eyes of his critics, he lied. He broke his promise. So for them, it's not trustworthy. And, and he does not have agenda to rectify the failures of Yoon Suk-yeol presidency and then failures of the People Power Party altogether. There isn't much that can be expected from him, according to his critics. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But altogether, we understand that Kim Moon-soo is sort of like Lee Jae-myung on the other side. He's basically pro-economy, pro-economic growth, pro-business, and he has shown quite a record in terms of design of a policy and implementer of a policy as a whole. So that's the critical background to understand where he's coming from in terms of what we can expect in terms of his future policies.
Yes. And also, briefly, can we also talk about Lee Jun-seok?
Lee Jun-seok's case, he is a kind of important alternative in the eyes of his supporters. He's a real alternative to this old politics, right? These people in their 50s, 60s, and this old generation who fought for Korean democracy during the 1980s. They have had enough of it. And now it's time for Korea to move on to a new generation. And in the eyes of Lee Jun-seok's supporters, he represents this young generation. And particularly among his enthusiastic supporters, what we find is his young men on the conservative side. And they're very excited about him because he's a straight shooter, he's very smart, he's very spontaneous, he's very good at presidential debate, and he has some of the ideas he has presented quite creative, quite productive policy ideas and productive ways of reorganizing the government and everything. That excites the supporters altogether. They really believe Lee Jun-seok represents the next generation and the future. However, having said that, Lee Jun-seok carries his own baggage, right? In the eyes of critics, of course, for the last few days, what we've been hearing is all about his insensitivity about these certain issues, particularly gender issues, and that really hurts him on behalf of the population. Female voters, especially young female voters, are turned off and they don't seem to see much of a future or promise or excitement in Lee Jun-suk at all. That's a real disappointment in terms of his future policies. If he gets ever elected as a president, young female voters seem to see there isn't much we can expect from him, and the policies he will be introducing will probably serve the interest of young men. It may be a misled belief, but that's the belief the young female voters seem to be holding at this point.
Yes.
So altogether, the critics seem to believe that Lee Jun-suk represents division rather than the possibility of unity for Korean politics, even though he has seemed to have different kind of supposedly new ideas. Wrapping up all together for Lee Jun-suk, so combining these two different views together, he represents future, he represents good ideas.
Yes.
But looks like he needs to work on his sensitivity and ability to embrace the wider spectrum of the supporters or voters here. And in doing so, we could expect more balanced policy. As it is, looks like his balance, the policy landscape seems to be a little bit tilted into one direction, according to particularly his critics.
Yes. Thanks for going over all the pledges and the supporter side and also the critics of what they say of each candidate. I do want to jump into this, Professor. What are we looking at in terms of pledges that have been made for the Busan or Gyeongnam areas?
Okay, Busan, Gyeongnam area. I was born in Busan. I was raised there before I started my college. It's a town where my heart lies, and I'm a Busan guy, and I greatly care about the future of Busan altogether. Having said that, however, in talking about Busan, first thing that comes to my mind is quite interesting. You might laugh at this point, but I think about JFK's words. He said, ask not what your country will do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. That's what I'm thinking about Busan. Busan is Korea's leading locality. Of course, there's a Gyeonggi area here as Seoul, but Busan is Korea's leading locality that represents future, the way I see it. Of course, Busan has polarized aspect. There's old Busan, larger side of Busan that's fast aging and declining fast, and they have their own concerns. I want to call it we because I'm from Busan. We have our own concerns.
Yes.
In that part of the area and Gyeongnam area as well. But we also have, on the other hand, like Haeundae area where some of the Korea's richest people come to live, and the location where our Busan EFM is located as well. This glitzy and shiny and bright and international place.
Sure.
I think rather than asking or thinking about what we will expect from the new government, central government, I think Busan, as we have worked pretty well so far, I think we should continue to carry on our hard work to make Busan a better place. We've been quite successful, and I think we should continue on setting the example for the country, showing the country the new direction, and even showing the new president what Korea should do going forward into the future. And I've been seeing all these international events like Busan International Film Festival. We tried hard to host Expo. In doing so, we have learned a lot about being international. And we recently had an international Expo on defense industry. We have all these international events. So being international, being open-minded, being future-oriented and stuff, I think Busan City and Gyeongnam region should continue on its wonderful work, setting examples for the Korea as a whole.
Yes. Well, of course, early voting continues today, Professor, and of course, the actual election is upon us coming this Tuesday. But thank you so much for coming on air with us once again, sharing your expertise and knowledge with our listeners. And of course, we wish you well. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much.
This was Professor Kim Byung-ju with our special interview. And we do appreciate him going over the analysis of each candidate. And I'll be back with our next segment with Andrew 교수님.
Good morning. Good morning.
굿모닝입니다.
Good morning.
좋은 아침입니다.
Morning wave in Busan.
Morning Wave in Busan.
Morning Wave in Busan. Major news, local buzz, and expert takes. It's all here on Morning Wave in Busan. Brighten up your morning commute with Morning Wave in Busan.
Morning Wave in Busan.
It is time for Global Affairs. And of course, we have Professor Andrew Millard in the studio. Welcome back.
Good morning.
Oh my gosh, you're not wearing your dog tie.
I'm not. I'm just more casual.
Yes,
today.
we're trying to blend in both of us into our backgrounds. Not showing distinct colors. We do appreciate that, though. Yes. Yeah. So let's dive into our segment because I want to get as much out of it as we can. So, what are we going to talk about?
So last week we talked about. What did we talk about last week? I can't remember.
Oh, what did we talk about? Has it been that long?
But I remember we talked about.
We talked about Trump. Our producer says, "Did we?" Yes, we did.
Oh, we talked about Trump.
Oh, yeah. The Trump effect on other countries, namely the European countries.
Oh, that's right. So we were talking about that, and then we got into this idea of, especially because I'm from the UK, what are sort of the UK-EU relations?
Oh, that's right, that's right.
I know the sort of the recent UK-EU treaty, I think you talked about in the show earlier in the week. So I thought what we'd talk about is something a lot of, especially Koreans, but a lot of Europeans, a lot of young British people also these days don't know, is sort of the history of the UK-EU relations.
That's important, though.
Oh, it's very important.
Yes.
So whenever you're studying modern politics, international relations, it's always important to understand the history, not the past few years, so the past 50, 100 years, even further back, really to understand why we have these current relations.
Sure. I agree.
And for Europe, the UK, we say it's always had one foot in Europe in terms of the European Union and one foot out of Europe. So it's always been sort of wanting to be a certain part of it.
Right.
But never wanting to fully commit like a lot of the other countries do. So I thought we'd take a little bit of a look at those ideas.
I'm all in because I just feel like, if you're even if you're British, as you say, or European, you might not fully understand it, but especially here on the Korean Peninsula, I was educated in the States. We don't fully grasp the deep relationship, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So tell us, let's begin.
Well, really, we have to go right back to the 1950s.
1950s,
so
okay.
The European Union started back in 1952.
Yes.
Actually started as a very small little coal and steel community. It wasn't a big economic single market back then. It was just purely coal and steel. And then in 1957, it expanded to the European Economic Community, EEC.
Yes.
Now, the UK at that time was invited to join both of those communities, the ECSC and the EEC.
Okay.
However, you have to remember this is 1950, just after World War II, and you have lots of different ideas. Firstly, in World War II, the German military, they attempted to invade the UK, but they were never successful.
Yes.
So right from the end of World War II, when, of course, there was victory for the Allies, the British had this sort of sense of superiority. The Germans, they couldn't defeat us. They couldn't invade us. So a little bit of, a slight difference in the mindset of the British versus the mainland Europeans. So there's that. But there's also the fact that the UK is well known for having an empire where the sun never sets. So it used to have colonies all around the world.
Right.
And for the UK, for the past 150 years before that, 200 years, these colonies, they were the center, the whole world for British trade.
Right.
And after World War II, the British kind of had a decision. Do they need to start focusing more on Europe? Or do they continue with that sort of past legacy of colonial trade in what became the Commonwealth?
Yes.
So basically the British made the bad decision and chose not to go to Europe and chose to remain with their colonies. But for the next then 20 years, decolonization happened.
Yes.
And so the British economy started to really harak. What's that in English? Decline. Sometimes I forget the English sometimes.
Sometimes I feel like I've been in Korea so long. Like I have these moments, I have brain fog. I'm like, what's the word? Like,
it happens to me far too often.
Right,
days.
it happens to me as well. So yes.
So the economy, the British economy, really started to decline and wasn't growing fast. Whereas the Europeans, because they had this new European economic community with reducing tariffs and sort of free trade, their economy was growing doubly as fast.
Right, flourishing.
And so in the 1960s, the British, they thought, maybe we should join. So firstly, they created what's known as EFTA.
Yes.
EFTA, which was basically like a competitor to the EEC. But you couldn't be a member of both.
Oh,
you had to choose
one. Okay.
And so in the 60s, 63 and 67, the UK tried to join the EEC. Both times, the French, in particular Charles de Gaulle, rejected their membership. Literally said no, as they say in France.
Yes.
Basically because at that point, Charles de Gaulle, France, wanted to be the center of Europe.
Right.
And they were the biggest member state. So they said no. Eventually, in the early 70s, 73, that's when the UK finally was accepted in what's known as the first enlargement.
Right.
Okay. But again, this is also very important. The timing. So we have 1973. What happened in 1973?
Oil crisis.
The oil crisis. So we have a lot of British people expecting, we'll join the EEC.
Finally in.
And we'll start to see this massive growth and all of these positive benefits. And they join, and basically, immediately there's the oil shock.
Yes.
A whole huge global recession. We're paying lots of money to the EEC. So immediately, I think 1975, 2 or 3 years later, we had a referendum.
Okay.
Straight away, should we stay or should we leave?
So soon. You just joined in 73.
Immediately.
But like 2 years
so
later.
In that case, the British public said, no, we should stay.
Okay.
Let's give it a go.
Okay.
So, but again, this background right from the very start, should we join, should we not join? When they do join, then we have these bad experiences.
시작부터 안 좋았어요. Really?
A new vote. So for the Europeans, they're always looking at the British like, do they want to be here or do they not want to be here? And for the British as well,
Is there always a question like, do we want to be here or do we not?
So this is also important. Again, we have to go back to the 70s. When they joined in 73, the European, at that point, community, as was becoming known, really was a very different system to the European Union that we have today.
Okay.
So again, it started off very small and it's just constantly expanded over time. And the EU government, what we call the EU institutions, over time, they have just got stronger and stronger and stronger. And the national governments have got weaker and weaker.
Yes.
And so, especially things like not just the number of member states joining, but also the decision-making process.
Right.
Originally, it was more unanimity-based.
Okay.
Which gave each member state, to a degree, some sort of leverage. Because if they really didn't like a policy, they could just say, no, we reject.
Okay.
And therefore nothing would happen, which happened quite a lot in the 60s, 70s. But over time, it's changed more to, I'll keep it simple, majority voting. It's actually more complicated than that.
Right.
But that means that countries like the UK, if they say, no, we don't like this, but everyone else says, yes, we do,
then
it gets passed. And by law, all member states then have to follow the new law.
Right.
And so over time, it's just really changed.
Yes.
And so the UK, originally they wanted to be part of this sort of just the economic, the free trade single market. They didn't want the social policy and all of these other regulations
I see.
that have come along later on.
Okay. So I think we have a much better understanding of this very complicated.
It's very complicated.
And like long, going back, decades, probably even hundreds of years, the history between, of course, the UK and the European nations.
Right.
What else do we need to know about to better understand this relationship where we are now, even post-Brexit?
So post-Brexit, this is where it gets, to be honest, even more complicated.
No.
So now we're going back to, again, sort of trade links.
Okay.
And if we have Brexit, how close should we remain with the European Union? Because all of the European Union's trade is decided by the EU institutions. And so if the UK starts getting too close to the EU again, then those decisions will be made by the EU institutions.
I see.
So in which case Brexit becomes irrelevant.
Because once again, what was the point then of leaving?
Exactly. So we've left, but the EU is still making decisions for us, but we have now no say. We have no vote.
That's even worse. Yes.
Exactly. So this is kind of the situation in the UK right now, where you have some groups saying, nope, we need to stay close to the EU. But you have other groups saying, no, we've left. Brexit meant Brexit, as they say in England. So now we need to stay sort of far apart so that we can then have our own FTAs with various different countries.
What a conundrum, though. Because with what's going on in the world right now, economy-wise, politically as well.
Politically, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on with, obviously we talked about in previous weeks, U.S. President Donald Trump as well. It's just like a whole new landscape right now.
Right. So this is interesting times, I would say.
I'm also curious. I don't know if you have maybe like a specific number, but the general feeling, because what we saw in the news was after Brexit, there seemed to be at least many people who kind of had regrets, like, oh, why didn't we fight harder to, stay married to the EU, and other people say, no, we left, it's done, right? There seemed to be a lot of division at the time.
I mean, to be honest, again, I've been in Korea now 20 years.
Yes.
So, I'm not sure on the figures, but from what I've heard from friends and family and people back home,
like the real feel. What
generally, it's still very much divided.
Okay.
You still have those strong supporters who say, nope, we've left. We're glad we left.
Right.
And let's just take it from here. But you still have, especially the younger people who say, no, we shouldn't have left. We need to have stayed in the EU.
I see. So, if we had to wrap up, what's the last thing you want to leave our listeners with as we, head in to Friday morning?
That's a good question. I guess just as we have a lot of political activity in Korea and around the world coming up, just to have everyone think carefully about their political choices.
Oh, no, but that's so true. I mean, everybody says, oh, your vote counts, every vote matters.
Right,
but
exactly.
also,
it does.
Research, think, have discussions before you go into the polling station, right?
And also, what I tell my students in class is, especially in politics, as long as you can sort of argue your opinion well, there's no right or wrong.
Point taken. Well, thank you so much for giving us more knowledge about what was in the background of this whole relationship between the UK and EU. So we have a better understanding. And of course, we'll check in with you next week. Thank you.
I'll be back.
All right, this was Global Affairs, and it's time to wrap up our show today already, actually for the entire week. And once again, early voting will continue until 6 p.m. tonight. Make sure if you go, you take an official form of identification with you. And next week, it's all going to be about the election. The big day is coming up upon us real quick. I hope that you have a wonderful weekend and join us again on Monday. So we're going to leave you with this song. This is Hey 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 by Taorim. Have a good one. Bye, everybody.